Hi everybody. Now I'm going to read Alcoholics Anonymous, Chapter 1. Hold on, let me get to it. Bill's story. This talks about about Bill's story, who's the co-founder of AA. So, this is 8 pages long. So I hope I can read it tonight. The whole thing tonight. I believe in my higher power that I can do it. Hi, my name is Patricia. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. So, this is Bill's story. Chapter 1. War fever ran high in New England town, in which we knew young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the new citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime, with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last, and in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and the procedures of my people concerning drink. It's time we sailed for over there. I was lonely and again turned to alcohol. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Capital, which much moved. I wandered and outside. My attention was caught by a doggle on an old dumpster. Here lies Hamster Grandador, who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is never forgot, but whether he died by mugs or by pots. A ominous warning, which I failed to heed. 22 and a veteran of forging wars, I went home at last. I finished myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation, my talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of the vast enterprises which I would manage with the utmost assurance. I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I proved to the world I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law. I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Through my drinking was not yet continuous. I disturbed my wife. It disturbed my wife. I'm sorry. We had long talks when I would steal her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceived by their best project when drunk, that the most majestic construction of philosophic thought was so deserved. By the time I had completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in the grip. Business financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this hour of drink and speculation, I commenced a forged the weapon that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. It went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. I failed to pursue my broker friends to send me out looking for factories and managements. But my wife and I decided to go anyway. I had developed a theory that most people lost money and stock through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. We gave up our positions and off-we rode on a motorcycle, the sidecar stuffed with tent blankets, a change of clothes, and a large 3 volumes of a financial reference service. Our friends thought a Lancashire commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had had some success in speculation. So we had a little money, but we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. At the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there, and the use of a large expense account, the exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drink was taking an important and exaggerating part in my life. There was loud talk in jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in thousands and shattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. My drinking assumed more serious preparation, continuing all day and almost every night. The reminiscences of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes in our substance apartment. There had been no real infidelity for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of the scrapes. In 1929, I contacted Golf Fever. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud, while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. Golf permitted drinking. Every day and every night, it was fun to caroom around the excessive course which had inspired just awe in me. As a lad, I acquired the impressionable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. Apparently, in October 29, 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of the tape which bore the inscription XYZ32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since then, 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fear, fierce determination to win came back. Nothing. Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No Santana for me, but drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time, we stayed broke. When we went to live with my friend wife's parents, I found a job and lost it as a result of a battle with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess I was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store. Coming home exhausted to find me drunk, I became an unwelcome hanger on a brokerage places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessary bathtub, gin 2 bottles a day, and often three got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s and would pay my bills at the bars and the temptations. And this went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. I trembled full of gin, followed by a half a dozen bottles of beer would be required if I to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. Oh no, that's my face. Nevertheless, I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a progressive bender, and the chance vanished. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed at this time I meant business, and so did I. So I did. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. The will had been my high resolve. I simply didn't know it had even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for just an appalling lack of perspective seemed near, being just that, renewing my resolve. I tried again. Some time passed. And confidence began to replace my cocksomeness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time I was beating at the bar, asking myself how it happened. It At the whiskey rose to my head. I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgivable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending comedy. I hardly dare cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it sincerely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen down by the earth, sincerely daylight. I'm sorry, I'm losing my place. All in the night, an all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of all. My withering nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me that market had gone to hell again. Well, sure had I. The market wouldn't recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So 2 bottles and authorization. The mind and body in Morpheus Magnesiums for mine endured this agony for 2 more years. Sometimes I stole my wife's slender purse in the morning. Terror and madness were on me. Again I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there were poison, cursing myself for a wriggling. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, least a suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative, and this combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity, so did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking. When I was 40 pounds underweight, my brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a naturally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, but my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mind exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that through certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill bodily and mentally. It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor through it often remains strong in a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I failed forth in high hope for 3 or 4 months of goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. But it was not. For the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish. The current shouldn't, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure, during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the ashram. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, as was cornered at last. Now I was plunged into the dark, joining the endless procession of shots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I have met my match. I have been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital. A broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insanity of the first drink. In Independence Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became reassigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last deproach. I was soon to be capitulated into what I would like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know hope, happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Near the end, the bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen with a certain satisfaction. I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through the night. And the next day, my wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a few bottles of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in the condition. I was amazed. Humor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course, he would have dinner and then I would drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapitulating the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in the dreary desert of fertility. The very thing an oasis drinkers are like that. The door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it, disappointed but curious. I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's all this about? I inquired. He looked straight at me simply but smiling. He said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. But he did no ranting. In matter of fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court pursuing the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious ideal and a particular program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. He had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I was shocked but interesting, certainly I was interested. I had to be. I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memory rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays way over there on the hillside. There was the pro, pro offered temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings, his insistence that feels really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These reconnections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a higher power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, but for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a stifle and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the anthropologists, evolutionists, suggest vast laws and forces at work despite contrary indication. I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of peace and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in the spirit of the universe, which who knew neither time or nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers in the world's religion, I parted right there. When Dave talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength and direction, I became irritated by, and my mind snapped shut against each a theory. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. The wars which had been fought and the burnings and clemency, that religious dispute facilitated, made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good, judging from what I had seen in Europe, and since the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The Brotherhood of Man, a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. But my friend sat before me, and he made a point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up, like myself. He had admitted complete defect. Then he had in fact been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that moment, at that minute. And this was none at all. That floored me into it began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was not something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. But never mind the musty past. There sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil, despite the living example of my friend. There remained in me the vintage of my procedural prejudice. The word God still erodes a certain antipathy when the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me. This feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea I could go for such assumptions of creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of Quetzal of the heavens. However loving his way might be, I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested that what then seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy Tentacle mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself Nothing more was required of me to make any beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point upon a foundation to a complete willingness. I might build what I saw in my friend. I would have would I have it? Of course I would. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want Him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed, scales of pride, of prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. The real sufficiency, sufficiency of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment I have needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have Him with me, and He came. But soon the sense of His presence had been blotted out by worldly commerce, mostly those within myself, and so it had been ever since. How blind I have been. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens. There I humbly offered myself to God, as I then understood Him to do with me as I would, as I placed myself unreservedly under His care and direction. Admitted for the first time that to myself I was nothing, that without Him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I have not had a drink since. My schoolmate visited me, and I fully acquainted him with my problem and difficulties. We made a list of people I had hurt or toward whom I felt resentment. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly, then to doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems. As He would have me, never was I to pray for myself, except as my request bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. My friend promised that when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus the willingness, honesty, and humility. to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. A simple but not easy, a price had to be paid. It meant destruction and self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light, who presides over us all. These were reverently and the drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effort was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace of serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. For a moment I was alarmed and called my friend, the doctor, to ask if I was still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked. Finally he shook his head, saying, "Something has happened to you. I don't understand, but you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were." The good doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. He knows that they are real. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I would help some of them. They in turn might work with others. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity demonstrating these principles in all my affairs, particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said. How appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect to enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is like that. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with ostracism in enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of the problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up, set on my feet, in its design for living that works in rough going. We consent to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, if of which it is wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living, we really have even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, through bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I have seen men come out of ashrams and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is securely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one western city, it is convenience. There are 1,000 of us in our families. We meet fictionally, so that newcomers may find the fellowship. They seek at these informal gatherings. One may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming wordlessness and liberty, but just underneath there is deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day, and through us or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for Atropia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in widening circle of peace and earth and good will to men. Bill W., co-founder of AA, died January 24th, 1971, the co-founder.